Welcome back to another episode of the Transformative Principal. My name is Mike Caldwell. I'm your host today, and joining me is Dr. Kristilynn Turney. Kristilynn, so happy to have you on the show.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Kristilynn and I have known each other now for just about a year, right? Somewhere in there.
Yes.
I think
Yeah.
I reached out cold reach out, I think on Facebook and connected with you and invited you in to be part of this Link Leaders project that I've been working on. And over the time, I've got to know you, and you're a mover and a shaker and out there doing some great things in
Yes.
education that we're going to talk about. So we'll get after that. First, why don't you share? Let's just go right into it. You talked about being labeled as a problem child. When I read that, I'm like, what? What is that about? So we'll come back to a little bit more of your background, but let's just open it up. What do you mean by labeled as a problem child? I couldn't imagine you being labeled as a problem child.
Well, yes, I was labeled as a problem child, and let me tell you why. Because I love to talk, even to this day, if you don't already know that. And so, by being a talker, that was kind of labeled as a problem during that time that I was in school because I would never shut up, and that would interfere with instruction, with other student learning. And that became that label, that tag for me as a problem. And I don't think in the midst of that, teachers saw the opportunities that we see with talkative students these days. But in that time, I was a problem.
Well, and look at it serving you now, talking and
Oh, yes,
communicating with leaders all across the country. And so it served you well to have that, I guess, initiative
absolutely.
to speak up. So share a little bit about your background and where'd you grow up? What are kind of some of your formidable experiences as a leader? And then we'll go from there.
Absolutely. Thank you for asking. I feel like I have always been a leader, and I think that that goes with being talkative and, in some regards, outspoken. I am born and raised Cincinnati, Ohio, huge Cincinnati Bengals fan. From there, well, in the meantime, I graduated from North College Hill High School, went to Bowling Green State University on a track scholarship. After that, came back home to Cincinnati and started teaching English and theater. I was also a drama director. After I left the classroom, I went into school improvement with a focus on literacy, and then I became an assistant principal, a middle school principal, a high school principal, and in district office. And one of the things that I am most proud of in my career is I was the first Black principal of two predominantly white suburban schools, Fairfield Middle School as well as Coleraine High School, both in the greater Cincinnati, Ohio area. And with that came large responsibilities, not only by being the first Black principal, but also being a female principal and helping those buildings transition and shift during that time. While I was in district office, I worked in human resources, curriculum, and intervention, as well as diversity. And in 2019, I said, let me give this full time consulting thing a try. And I even said, if it doesn't work out by April 2020, I can always go back. And so, of course, when we say April 2020, we all know what happened by that point. But I was really soaring in my work. In May 2020, America witnessed the unfortunate killing of George Floyd. And that really shifted and took shape around some diversity initiatives, especially in schools. And so that really pushed me in my role to continue my work around diversity plans and equity audits for schools. And I have continued that line of work in addition to leadership, providing coaching and consulting in the area of leadership as well as school improvement. And I'm also a very proud speaker, and I want to connect with districts as well as educational entities and organizations who might love to hear my story from problem to principal, or some of my other signature talks, which includes leading with grace, strength, and high heels for our female leaders, whether they are educational leaders or leaders in other spaces, as well as from burnout to buy-in, shifting the culture in your school or organization.
Awesome. And we'll make sure we include a link in the show notes for your website and your information so people can follow up on that. You have a lot to offer, no question.
Thank you.
I want to go back. You talked about being the first Black principal of two schools. Can you elaborate a little bit? What does it really mean to be the first, and what pressures or responsibilities did you feel that maybe others did not see, or maybe someone maybe like me that maybe doesn't quite understand that? Can you elaborate a little bit?
Absolutely. Being the first is a trailblazer. You are setting that path for others, as well as setting the example. So I knew that I could be viewed as someone who led the building in a very positive way, and that opened the door for other Black principals or female principals. Or if I led in a negative way, that closed the door for others. It also meant representation not only for staff, but our students who viewed me as obviously the first, and that power behind their ability to be able to do it as well. And that leads me to a point on another one of my signature talks, Be the First, being the first. And that is for student groups. And I facilitated and led some of those student groups in that respect as well, because the students need to hear and see that story and that example as well. So it was an empowering experience, but it also allowed me to support and empower others and leave a very strong legacy for those to follow, as well as for students and staff to model.
When you talk with on being the first, that sounds like something you're directing to students. What is some of the, or maybe it's not exclusive to students, but what's some of the kind of messaging in there, what you're hoping that they will pull away or walk away from that talk? Not to give it
Yeah,
away, but
yes. Yes, no worries. Hoping that students will see and experience that it is okay to be the first. It does come with weight, and it is for some a change cycle for them, whether that is their first to graduate from high school, or the first to go off to college, or the first to start a business. That is a shift for many students, even still today. But hearing that message from me empowers them, as well as gives them that encouragement to be able to say, yeah, it's scary, but this is something that I'm able to accomplish and do.
absolutely. Yeah, so when you walk into a building and no one in leadership looks like you, as you've mentioned, what's happening internally, emotionally, and strategically? What that maybe people don't talk about. What is that like?
Yeah, it is very, for me, focused on doing the job. While I recognize there is a weight on me, I don't think others recognize that. And I know that I can't use that as a crutch or a challenge or a barrier. I use that as an opening to say, okay, here I am, here's what I bring, and here's what we are going to accomplish. And so while there is power in being the first of whatever it is, we can't just stop there and limit that whole conversation to that. While I was in my buildings, I was very fortunate to be a change maker as well as a system changer when it came to our code of conduct, when it came to some of our teaming and our master scheduling, and also that barrier breaker when it came to shifting the culture from what it had previously been, which in a few cases a little more punitive and not focused, and lacked the guidance that it needed. So again, my role didn't just stop there, it continued on, including taking the graduation rate from 86.4% to 92.4% in 2 years, which was at that time the highest average in 6 years. So it started with, okay, yep, she's the first, here she is, but I didn't limit it to that. And I wanted to make sure that I left a very strong and positive legacy once I left.
This podcast, Transformative Principal, for me, it's such a great opportunity for those that are listening to give them kind of a really solid nugget, something that they can regardless of their background and where they're leading, something they can walk away with and say, okay, that's a new idea or a new thought that I'm going to maybe apply to my leadership. So as you think about your impact as your time as a leader and some of the things that you just shared with the growth and achievement and those types of things, let's drill down like under the hood. When you are leading, what do you attribute, like specifically, like what are some of the things that you did that you're most proud of that you kind of attribute success to? What are some very specific things that you feel are kind of like this is this made the impact?
I think what made the greatest impact is that I built relationships very quickly with staff, students, family, a district office, as well as community supports. I got in there and was very intentional in knowing that I needed everyone around me to be on my team in order for my team to be successful. So when it was time to implement those systems and those changes, that I had a collaborative approach into doing this, and it wasn't just this new principal is too bold and she's trying to push all these systems and changes. It was us together as a community making those decisions. I think also in building those relationships, it opened up that level of empowerment. So I gave teachers back that power to say, I'm going to trust you in your role as a teacher, just as I want you to trust me in my role as a principal. So if you feel that this is what is best for students, and these are the instructional shifts that you need to make to reach our building goals and the vision that I've set out, then I trust you to do it. And I think that more than anything, the building of those relationships and giving off that authority really helped change and move our systems for the better and also get those academic results that I spoke about.
And sometimes as a new leader, we go in and sometimes we can make a mistake by jumping in and trying to change things too fast if we're not
Oh, yes.
familiar with the environment. I know I had that experience when I started as in my first principalship and trying to move too fast and not bringing everybody along, right? But at the core of what you said, I think is absolutely true. The building the relationships and trust, the collaborative kind of efforts with your staff, all make a difference in terms of moving the dial. What are some of the mistakes that you feel like you made as an early leader that you look back and say, okay, I would have done that different?
Absolutely. Well, you just hit the nail on the head, like jumping in and saying, I'm going to do this and this by tomorrow, right? And so, very quickly, I said, you know what? First of all, that wasn't the approach that felt comfortable for me. I think that that was possibly the approach that was modeled for me, as well as encouraged by the superintendent and the district staff to say, you need to get in there and change all of these things tomorrow, right? And so that was, in fact, a mistake. And as I said, that didn't feel comfortable for me. Um, I knew how to get there, it just wasn't that way. And so that's when I really said, you know what? We're going to get there. Do me a favor. Give me some time, and I'm going to make sure that this laundry list of things gets done. I'm just going to get it done, not only in my time, but in the way that I know is comfortable for me and what I've structured my staff and my students and really my whole school community around.
How did you get from, or how did you navigate kind of maybe your ideas of this is my vision for the school versus our collective vision and moving forward? Like, how do you do that? Because sometimes we go in as leaders, right? And we're like, we see where we want to go, um, and sometimes go again too fast or not take in kind of a full intake of our environment and other opinions and things like that. Do you have some tips or ideas on how to kind of navigate that so it's not just you way out in front and leaving everybody behind and really getting that collective vision?
Yes. So, very strategic and intentional in your approach. And I say that because, again, Every leader enters a building with a list of things that they want to change almost immediately. But those things take time. And one of the things that I really reflected on is somewhere along the line, these building leadership team members, these teachers, thought this approach was a great idea. So I don't want to slap them in the face by coming in and saying, nope, we're not doing that, or that, right? Because these are the same individuals who built this system, maybe even the year before. So now bringing them to the table and having these conversations and saying, okay, kind of walk me through this process of how did we get here? How did it look? What worked well? What didn't work so well? And then taking all of those pieces as a part of my strategic plan and vision. So even with one perfect example, is when I was a middle school principal, they wanted to change their team names. They had previously American themed teams. So the teams were named Freedom and Liberty and Justice. And it was amazing. You walked down the hall, you saw all the different American themed names, and it was really cool. But that had been a long-standing tradition for the school, and they wanted to change it. But I also had to take a step back and say, somewhere along the line, someone said, this is fabulous. This is wonderful. And yes, now we might be ready for a change, but what does that change process look like? How are we going to start to break down, okay, what themes are we now going to choose from? And how are we going to identify the names of the teams? And how are we going to ensure that this process is strong and everyone's input is a part of it, and that after we change these names, that it's sustainable, right? Because then after I leave, then everybody's like, we hated those names. Now we want to go back to, the American theme names. And so all of that is a process of strategy and taking into account and consideration what was that process that led to those decisions, and who am I to come in to many of these veteran teachers who were on those sitting committees to make those decisions, whether it's the team names, the code of conduct, the dress code. Who am I to come in and just say, this is all wrong, we're throwing it all away, we're going to do it my way? I'm no one in that regard, right? And we know that that's not best practice in leadership. And furthermore, we know that that's not going to be sustainable.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and some of those things are really hard to change because they're so
Oh, yeah.
integrated to history
Yep.
and and tradition and those types of things. I found, I don't know if you can relate to this, when I was lucky enough to start early enough in my first principalship that I was able to spend some time in the spring prior to actually taking over. And I had an opportunity, and I think this was a rare opportunity, where I can go and I was able to go and meet with every staff member, really every teacher in the building. I think we had 70 teachers at the time, and just spend 20 minutes with them and just interview them. And if I remember, I asked them three questions: what's going really well? What's the biggest challenge you see that you would like addressed? And I can't remember the third one, but just like general questions, and collected all that
Mm-hmm.
information. And that really helped me, even if you can't do it the spring before, as like spending some time in the fall in your first year, like just gathering
Mm-hmm.
that information from the staff perspective of what's going well and what's not going so well. And it's interesting to kind of collect that and then aggregate it and see what you get. So I loved that kind of part of the experience. Did you ever do anything like that when you started as a school leader?
Yes, that is a part of that learning, and making sure that your team knows that you are a team player and that you are there for them and to support them in their effort. So, of course, I spent that time saying, hey, everybody, just open office hours. I need to meet with you. And
Yes.
even if we come and talk about your family or what's going on in your life, that's okay. But I wanted to make those connections. And I ultimately used not only those school connections, but those personal connections to continue to build those relationships. So I had teachers who would share, hey, I'm caring for an elderly parent. And so then when there was something that happened, there was again that remembrance and that connection. Okay, yep, I remember you're caring for an elderly parent, and some things might look differently because of having to deal with things at home and not being able to be here for a day or a certain event. So that all goes as a part of it. And that's one thing that I provide when or give as advice when I provide leadership coaching. I suggest building those relationships, having them come in and just talk. Let me hear from you. Let me connect with you. And not always with an intent of arriving at a decision of what is the bell schedule going to look like next year, or which assemblies am I adding because this teacher said that. It can, again, just be we're just connecting, we're building relationships, and I'm getting to know you a little bit better so that, again, all of those pieces fit together when it's decision making time.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I think sometimes you can do everything you can to build the relationships and do all the things that you think are the right moves, but inevitably you're going to run into resistance, right? And
Always.
that could be a couple teachers, or it could be or staff members, or even greater, you know, level of resistance depending on what you're trying to do. Talk to a little bit like how do leaders how do leaders hold firm to change while navigating resistance, or know when to really kind of pay attention to the resistance and possibly even change course or pivot a little bit, like that balance between pressing forward versus wait, there's something here that I got to really pay attention to. Any guidance there?
Yes. So anything that aligns to the vision and that is ultimately best for students, those are the things that we have to hold firm on. These become those non negotiables. So if we're talking about data driven decisions and how we are providing assessments or how we are evaluating assessments and modifying instruction based on those assessments, to me, those very much become non negotiables. However, what becomes somewhere where there's this opening or this pivot is maybe the teacher based team or the professional learning community setting isn't the best. Maybe you want to do smaller groups or one-on-one as we're reviewing data-driven decisions. Maybe you want an instructional coach present along with that process. Or maybe you just want more input to say, here's how the students tested, but here's what I think. Here's how we arrived at that point. I think that there is always that balance of us as leaders, yes, being very firm because we know what's going to drive where we are going, but then also having that opening to say, you know what? Yes, I can relax a little bit on that. If it makes you feel comfortable or it makes you feel safe to do it this way, that's fine because guess what? We're still going to arrive at the same place that we were set out to go to.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Um, there's so much of this is really, again, going back to the relationships, because really true transformation and some of the major shifts that you were able to make as a leader doesn't start with the programs. It starts with people, right? And it starts with people feeling seen, heard, but also challenged, to
Mhm.
grow and stretch in their profession. In a real practical, let's call it, what's today, a Wednesday, like on a given random Wednesday in your school, what does that practice look like in terms of making sure that people feel seen, heard, but also pushed and challenged?
Yes, from a leadership standpoint, for me, that's visibility, and that's visibility for everyone and making those connections to everyone. I worked very hard to know as many students' names as I could. I also worked very hard to know all of my staff names, members' names, and at least one thing about them, whether it was, their dog name, Quincy, or whether it was some connections that we made, like, hey, I have twins, you have twins, or your birthday is in March, just like my birthday is in March. So making those connections to ensure that everyone is seen and heard, and that they are pushed and challenged, right? Because I think when we take you are seen, you are heard, we have these relationships, then when it's time for me to challenge you, you're prepared because you know that not only do I have the best interest of the students in mind, but I also have their best interest, and we are all striving for that common goal. And we don't need anybody who's going to row the opposite way. We need everybody rowing in the same direction, because when I win, then we all win.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, as you look back in your 20 years, is it 20, 30 years in education? How many years is it?
27.
27 years of education. Curious, what chapter of your leadership story are you still writing?
I think oh, wow. As a consultant, and now how am I supporting other leaders, especially because I know a lot more. There's a lot more resources and opportunities to connect, as well as instructional tools out there. So I am very much still writing that leadership coach part of it, because again, just as I said before, when I win, we all win. When they win, I win too. And so I want to still be a part of that journey in supporting. And that is the thing that I'm still writing.
I love you said win. I'm curious. I'm going to push you a little bit here. Share an example of a recent win, maybe that you had in the leadership coaching, maybe a specific, without naming names, of course, specific leader that you were working with. Maybe describe the challenge that they were dealing with and how you helped them navigate that.
Yes, this is very recent. So I love this question. Thank you so much for asking. So, recently, I attended an administrative team meeting, and the administrative team meeting was very focused on housekeeping items. Student dress code violations, teacher walkthroughs, teacher evaluation systems. I needed that leader to really drill down to instruction. So, my question to that leader was, how does all of those things impact instruction? Now, before you jump on me, I get it. We got to have rules. There needs to be clear expectations. The walkthroughs, the evaluations are district and state mandated. That is clear. But how are we specifically drilling down to the instructional outcomes? So if we are, for instance, pulling students from class because they are in violation of the dress code, are we taking away in instruction, right? Is there a better way to not only address the student's infraction, but also ensure that they're not missing out on valuable class time? Same thing with teachers. If we are addressing them for not identifying those students who are not in compliance, whether it's dress code or behavior or whatever, are we removing that teacher from their instructional planning time that they could, again, have an impact on instruction? So I'm glad you asked that question. And to me, that was a win to drive home to say, this is great, but how does it impact instruction? And how can we reframe that to make sure that our focus is all instruction? So instead of just talking about, hey, you didn't do your 3 walkthroughs this week, let's talk about that target area in our walkthroughs that we want to focus on, right? Instead of, we got to meet these deadlines to our evaluation system, Let's talk about what the data is showing us. How many teachers are falling in this developing area, and what can we do to build them up so that they are reaching those higher levels? How can we support them instructionally so that they are getting there? So again, moving from that general picture, that level of general compliance, to drilling down in impact and student outcomes.
Yeah. Well, let's leave with one practical takeaway here. So for principals listening who want to begin shifting, whether it's culture or make a big move academically, but they want to do it tomorrow. What's one concrete action they could take this week?
Wow.
Concrete.
Okay, go with me. One concrete action: set a plan. Identify what it is that you are going to focus on and develop a plan around that. That next step, and I know we're talking about one, but this all goes into that one. That next step is sharing it and getting feedback so that you get not only others' opinions, but you also get support and ultimately buy-in in that action that you plan to take to move your staff and students.
Love it. Good stuff. All right, final question. What does it mean to you to be a transformative principal or transformative leader?
Yes, it means that you are shifting, that you are whatever that level of shift is, whether it is shifting in the culture and the climate, shifting in student expectations, staff expectations, instruction, and really that constant shift, because it's almost like once you get one thing right, there's still a whole line of other things that are waiting for you. So shifting and being transformational and being intentional about your shift and your goals and in moving. And then finally, making sure that you are continuing to monitor and evaluate the successes of your shifts.
Fantastic. Cool. Well, we'll make sure that we include your website and all your links
Yes,
for people to find you if they want to reach out and connect. There's so much we didn't cover that you can
of
offer and
course.
support leaders. And yeah, and Kristilynn, I appreciate your time and getting to know you over the last year or so. And best of luck to you as you help school leaders and district leaders navigate this difficult business of leadership that we are in education. So thank you again for your time.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks everyone for listening. It's another episode of Transformative Principal. We'll see you on the next one.